Today in the Brick Lab, we're going to be building on to the War Machine Buster. Without a doubt, this is definitely my favorite version of the Hulkbuster armor. I guess I should say after we've made a couple cosmetic changes to the suit. I mean, those gaps in the armor and that lack of elbows, definitely disturbing. But these are easy fixes, so let's go ahead and take a look. So I did make a few other changes on the way, and there will be a part list in the description with all the parts that I used on this build which weren't included in the set. So let's go ahead and take a look at this mech from the ground up. So the first thing I did was to switch around the direction of this slope down here, and also move the knee pad armor down a stud, just to improve the range of motion here, and also, for some reason, the knee pad armor up here just looked really weird to me, like it jutted out way too far. Of course, that does leave a little gap here, but you could always place in like a stud or something, just to help hide that out a little bit. And moving on up here to the arms, which are probably the most important thing, and the thing which needed the most fixing, we have these. And these are based pretty much on the Hulkbuster arms from the mech from last year, and if they do look pretty good, if I do say so myself. In fact, I was even able to leave these side armor pieces here on the upper arms, just to add in a little extra bulk. And these stayed pretty much the same. I did have to change them up a little. So we'll take a look at that real quick. They're a pretty simple build. You're going to take basically one of these harness pieces. I know it's not a harness, but for some reason that's what my brain wants to call it, so that's what we're going to call it. And we're just going to attach it to these pieces. This one is a regular plate. These are plates with, the bars on them. And one of these clip pieces. Then we're going to take this assembly, which is a slope and a jumper plate, both included in the set, and plug them in here. And then you're just going to finish it off with a couple of ingot pieces. And once you have that, you can go ahead and plug it into the arm as, like so. And the only problem with this is that it is just a little bit more fragile than the original armor, but that's no problem because what we can do is take one of these red slider plates. You will need one extra if you want to do this, and just plug them in onto the side here. It does kind of make the armor stick out a bit, but it makes it a whole lot sturdier, and hey, that may be the look you're going for anyway. Oh, and the arms can also go out to the side. You're just going to have to, raise this armor piece up a bit. It looks a little goofy, but I mean, this entire pose looks a little goofy, so, oh wait, never mind, he's T-posing. Moving on to the hands, those actually aren't too complicated. They're pretty simple, and you could probably just build them from looking at them. If not, well, here's a breakdown of how they were made. So we have this axle piece that is attached to the thumb, then we put in some gray plates here, and connected it to this socket piece, which is the base of our hand, and then we also have another plate here, and also this jumper plate. And then to finish the build, we're going to take this red plate with holes in it and line it up here on this thing, and you want to center that as much as possible because we're going to take this harness piece. Again, I really don't know the real name for this, so if you bricklink it and find out, please leave it in the comments below. So we're just going to plug that in, and if you were able to line it up very well, it won't be too difficult. If it is difficult, then we did something wrong. Mine is slightly difficult. Okay, and then to finish that up and lock it all into place, we're just going to take this assembly, which is a plate and a slope, and plug them in like so. And lastly, we're going to take this silver stud gun and plug that in. And there we go. We're just going to do the same thing for the other arm, and we're all set. And now on to my favorite part, the core. Well, not this core, but the body itself. So before, the armor was pretty much just standard Hulkbuster armor. Basically, you flip open the mask piece, you open the central compartment, and there you go. You slip in the minifigure, and you're done. But I love this new method a whole lot better. So we're just going to open up the plates in the side here. We're going to lift up the helmet, and then slide down this central part, and then the two flaps in the sides will open. And when you close it back up, it will look like the armor is building itself around the character, which is a feature that I really love in the Hulkbuster suits. And then to close it up, you're just going to push the pieces back in and basically build the suit around the character, a feature which makes my inner child scream with joy. Oh, and another thing I did was basically just to remove the slider plate here. Basically this helps the plate sit flush against the minifigure. I was afraid at first that it would kind of make this central piece just a little bit wobbly, but it actually doesn't, and it takes a lot of force in order to just tear this thing apart. Anyway, so there's that. And as you'll notice, this isn't the actual War Machine minifigure. It is actually a custom version because the real War Machine minifigure is super expensive at the moment, and I really didn't feel like paying that much. Plus, I wanted to show off this custom version, which you can make if you also don't want to pay that much. And to do that, you're just going to use the War Machine helmet that came in this set, the cyborg torso, and then legs from General Zod. Now, to be fair, you could also swap out these silver arms for black ones, but it kind of matches the suit that Iron Man wears in the Endgame sets, so it's some nice parallelism, so I'm just going to keep it that way. And also, as you'll notice, I did keep in the ammo in the back, but we're using a lot fewer studs since, of course, we only have the 2 stud guns now and not the giant stud cannon on top. So let's just put the minifigure back in. Oh, and while we're here, one other thing real quick. What I also did was placed in these wedge plates underneath the slope pieces here, just to help this plate sit a whole lot more flush against them. And it looks pretty cool. And in case you couldn't tell, the way I built these side armor pieces was just to use a couple clips, one of these hinge plates, and then the slope, and a double cheese slope. And then we can put those in. And then for these pieces, they used to hold ingots, the silver ingot pieces, but instead, I just use these wedge plates from the side, put them in, and there we go. Oh, and real quick, let's switch to the back, and you can see I also added in this red slider plate. This is the one that was from the center armor piece on the other side, just to help hide the little gap here that's on the back. I know it's not a huge deal, but it really kind of bugged me, so putting that back there makes me feel a whole lot better. And as you can see, I also swapped out those light bluish-gray robot arms for these dark bluish-gray Outrider arms. It really bugged me that they kind of made the head stick out a whole lot more than it had to, a little bit more than it had to. But with these Outrider arm pieces, it basically keeps them in line. It keeps the mask plate in line with the shoulders. And then we can just close this up. I know it's a really small detail, but it really makes me feel a whole lot better about the build. I'm not sure why. It's probably OCD. And if you want to shrink the shoulders down, you can. We'll get to a fix for that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about the weaponry. And if you're wondering why I kept the flick-fire missiles on here, well, it's just kind of a nod to my childhood, because when flick-fire missiles first came out, I loved them. Like, really loved them. Like, the first set that I got them in was an Indiana Jones set, I believe, and within a month or so, I'd worn out the flick fires so much, they would barely stay in the projectile launcher, so, you know. Of course, if you don't like flick fire missiles, you could just replace this little missile pod thing with something else, but I'm just keeping it because it makes my inner child happy. So moving over to the gun, this is basically just a standard Star Wars buildable clone trooper figure gun. I just switched it up a little bit to make it fit in with the build. Now, I prefer this a lot over the stud launcher, because to me the stud launcher was just way too skeletal. I mean, look at the back here, that's awful. And I think this fits the whole War Machine aesthetic a whole lot better. And I'm just gonna pull it off real quick so we can see how it's made. If you want to see how it's connected, it's basically using these socket pieces and these Technic pins with the ball joints on them, and a dark silver ingot piece just to tie it all together. So to look at the gun, it's pretty basic. We have, well, let's discharge the ammo there. We have a spring-loaded shooter in the front with some dark silver ingots just to help it blend into the barrel a whole lot better. And then we have this Technic connector, which is the trigger. You just pull that and it launches the spring-loaded shooter. And on the top, we have this assembly of Technic pieces, which some of them do come from the set. It's not too hard to make. Basically, I look at it as a sort of sight for the rifle, or you could pretend that it's just a smaller laser cannon or something, whatever. And then to make this back assembly, it looks complicated, but it's really not. It is just a Technic 4-length beam with these Technic connectors on the sides, and the reason for those is so that it gives you a spot to just store the ammo. And then on the back, you can see we have another slightly different connector piece with this bionicle tooth, and I used a red tooth just because I felt like it blended in with the color scheme of the thing. Black or maybe this color gray would probably be a whole lot better, but I like the look of that, so I'm just going to leave that for now. And let's plug that back in. Oh, and real quick, if you feel like the shoulders here are too steep, which they are pretty steep and bulky, I feel like that kind of fits in with War Machine, but if you want something a little more laid back, it's an easy fix. We're just going to remove these angled plates, and we're going to pull apart part of the back here. And we're going to remove this brick, and we're going to replace it with a plate. And on that plate, we are going to put in this assembly here, and we are going to attach a silver ingot piece to that. And there we go. And then we're just going to take this dark bluish gray plate and plug that in. And then you just have to do the same thing for the other side, and you are all set. So these shoulders are much more reasonable. The only problem I have with them is that these ingot pieces do not look nearly as cool and intimidating as having the wedge plates here. But, and I guess if you really wanted, you could keep the wedge plates in, but they just kind of stick out too far and they serve no real purpose at that point. So I guess if I was going to do this, I would just leave the ingot pieces there. And, I mean, the shoulders do look okay like this. It's not terrible, but like I said, My preference for these wedge plates means that I'm just going to leave the shoulders bulked up a whole lot. But this way looks pretty cool too. So I guess whichever way you prefer, it's up to you. I'm just going to leave it like this for the rest of the video since, you know what, we've reached the end. So that about wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, and do all that other good stuff. If you want to see more of my content, please feel free to check out my channel. And if you want more of my nonsense, please feel free to check out my social media profiles, links in the description below. I think that about wraps it up for today, so I will see you guys next time.